In a major study of individuals with intelligence in the top 2%, nearly 27% were diagnosed with a mood disorder, and 20% suffered from severe anxiety. We often assume that being fiercely perceptive is a superpower, a golden ticket to an easy life. But for those who process the emotional world much more deeply than average, this heightened awareness is often paralyzing. Absorbing every tiny detail around you does not just make you brilliant. It actively exhausts your central nervous system. Hello, and welcome back. I am Dr. Arthur Sterling. Today, we are exploring a fascinating psychological paradox. Why does having an unclouded, hyper-accurate perception of reality feel like such a heavy weight? And what happens when your brain simply refuses to filter out the noise? 1. The trap of overprocessing. Your brain is actively punishing you for noticing too much. While most people comfortably ignore the subtle tension in a room, or the microscopic shift in a colleague's posture, a specific subset of the population is biologically cursed to absorb every single data point with terrifying clarity. This relentless stream of information is not a psychological flaw, nor is it a sign of anxiety acting up. It is a hardwired neurological reality. Pioneering research by psychologist Dr. Elaine R. identifies that 15 to 20% of the population possesses what is known as sensory processing sensitivity. If you fall into this demographic, your central nervous system is fundamentally built to process physical and emotional stimuli much more deeply than the average person. You notice the aggressive flickering of fluorescent lights, the slight hum of the refrigerator, and the unspoken resentments hiding behind a polite smile. Your mind operates like an ultra-high-definition camera in a world where everyone else is perfectly happy shooting on standard resolution. You do not just casually observe the environment, you absorb it, parse it, and dissect it. But this biological upgrade comes with a staggering metabolic and emotional cost. To understand why this hyper-awareness feels like such a heavy burden, we have to look inside the skull. Functional magnetic resonance imaging scans reveal a striking difference in the neurology of these highly perceptive individuals. These brain scans show that highly sensitive persons exhibit significantly greater activity in the mirror neuron system, the specific brain area responsible for emotional reactivity, and empathy. For a typical brain, witnessing someone sigh in frustration triggers a fleeting moment of recognition before swiftly moving on. But for the overprocessing brain, the mirror neurons fire with explosive intensity, effectively tricking your nervous system into experiencing that exact same frustration as if it were physically happening to you. You are involuntarily downloading the emotional state of everyone around you. Now, combine this extreme emotional resonance with a cognitive engine that refuses to stop analyzing. This volatile combination creates a phenomenon known as psychological overexcitability. Your mind becomes a supercomputer that cannot, and will not, close any of its background applications. While others take a casual conversation at face value, your brain is simultaneously analyzing the speaker's tone, comparing it to their baseline behavior from 3 years ago, and calculating 7 different potential outcomes. This neurological inability to filter out the noise means you are constantly predicting threats that have not even materialized yet. You see the inevitable collision courses of human interactions miles before anyone else does, recognizing the subtle red flags in a relationship or a business deal on day one. Yet, being the only person who sees the oncoming storm is incredibly isolating, and it breeds a state of chronic background anxiety. You are perpetually braced for impact, living in an exhaustingly high state of alert, because your brain insists that processing enough information will keep you safe. The tragic irony of the overprocessing trap is that this fierce perception offers very little comfort. Instead, it actively exhausts your central nervous system. A simple trip to a noisy grocery store, or sitting through a standard hour-long office meeting, can leave you feeling completely drained, exactly as if you had just run a mental marathon. You are burdened with the heavy, unyielding task of managing an overwhelming influx of reality every single day. Seeing the world so clearly means you are painfully aware of the fragile, chaotic nature of everything around you, a relentless clarity that eventually pushes the mind to the very brink of exhaustion. 2. The high cost of empathy. When your brain cannot stop mirroring the emotions of everyone in the room, empathy ceases to be a virtue. It becomes a chronic, metabolic drain. Imagine carrying a heavy backpack. Now imagine that every time someone near you expresses a struggle, feels anxious, or hides a silent frustration, a literal brick is added to your bag. For the hyper-perceptive mind, empathy is not just a metaphorical concept. It is a physiological event demanding massive biological resources. This relentless emotional sensing leads directly to a debilitating condition, oblivious compassion fatigue. Extensively studied in the healthcare field, compassion fatigue is a state of severe mental and physical exhaustion that is directly mediated by a person's empathy levels when continuously exposed to the suffering of others. But here is the catch. The overprocessing brain does not need to work in a trauma center to experience this. Daily life provides more than enough emotional shrapnel. When a friend vents about a toxic workplace, a typical listener offers polite sympathy and moves on. The hyper-aware listener, however, fully reconstructs the stress of that environment in their own nervous system. Your adrenal glands release cortisol. Your heart rate alters. Your body genuinely believes it is under attack, even though the threat belongs to someone else entirely. Over time, this constant flooding of stress hormones fundamentally alters your baseline physiology. You are continually paying a steep physiological tax for crises that are not yours, leading inevitably to structural burnout. This is not just about needing a long weekend to recharge. It is a systemic depletion of your emotional reserves, leaving you hollowed out, irritable, and desperately craving isolation, just to stop the incoming data stream. This profound exhaustion is heavily compounded by a concept known as the depressive realism hypothesis, originally proposed by psychologists Lauren Alloy and Lynn Abramson in the 1979. Their research suggested that mildly depressed individuals actually possess a much more accurate, unclouded perception of reality and personal control than non-depressed people. You see the world exactly as it is, entirely stripped of the comforting illusions most people use to get through the day. And frankly, seeing reality that clearly is a terrifyingly heavy burden to bear. 3. The loneliness of clear vision. But what happens when you see this unclouded reality, and absolutely no one else does? You encounter a deeply alienating social phenomenon as the Cassandra syndrome, named after the mythological figure cursed to see the future but never be believed. This describes the profound isolation of the hyperperceptive mind. You easily spot the hidden motives in a new workplace policy, or the fatal systemic flaws in a friend's romantic relationship. But pointing them out usually just makes you the villain. Interestingly, raw brain power alone does not isolate you. A massive United Kingdom Biobank study analyzing up to 250,000 individuals demonstrated that high intelligence actually acts as a protective cognitive reserve AI and ST post-traumatic stress and anxiety. The data clearly indicates that it is the relentless depth of processing, the inability to turn off that psychological overexcitability, that causes the true burden, not just raw intelligence. When your mind operates at this exhaustive depth, connecting with everyday people becomes a social minefield. The vast majority of society naturally gravitates toward blissful ignorance, relying on comfortable, shared illusions to maintain social harmony and keep the peace. You, however, cannot simply unsee the glaring red flags. This forces a devastating daily choice. Do you voice the uncomfortable truth and risk being completely alienated, or do you bite your tongue and suffer the agonizing dissonance of playing along with a collective delusion? Ultimately, this disconnect creates an invisible wall, leaving the highly observant individual standing completely alone, even in the middle of a crowded room. 4. Managing the weight of clarity. So, you are trapped behind that invisible wall, hyper-aware of every flaw, every hidden agenda, and every unspoken emotion in the room. How do you survive when you cannot simply turn your brain off? The answer is not to numb yourself, or pretend you do not see the truth. The secret lies in transitioning from helpless hyper-awareness to purposeful, selective engagement. First, we need to look at exactly what is happening inside your head to understand how to manage it. Pioneering research by psychologist Dr. Elaine R. identifies that 15 to 20% of the population possesses a trait called sensory processing sensitivity. If you have this, your central nervous system is fundamentally wired to process physical and emotional stimuli much more deeply than average. This is not just a personality quirk, it is hardwired biology. Functional brain imaging scans reveal that highly sensitive persons show significantly greater activity in the mirror neuron system. That is the specific brain area responsible for emotional reactivity and empathy. Your brain is literally designed to mirror the world around you. But just because your internal mirror is incredibly polished does not mean you have to reflect everything all the time. You must learn to set ruthless emotional boundaries to protect that biological machinery. Think of your empathy as a strict daily financial budget. If you spend all your emotional currency on a co-worker's toxic drama before noon, you will be completely bankrupt by the time you get home. You have to stop volunteering for the emotional labor of everyone around you. Treat your sharp observations like passing cars on a highway. You can acknowledge they are driving by, but you do not have to jump into traffic to direct them. Building this firm boundary creates what we call a cognitive reserve. Instead of letting your brain automatically download every single piece of environmental stress, you put a psychological firewall in place. Just because you see the oncoming storm miles away does not mean you are personally obligated to build a shelter for everyone else. Sometimes, your only job is to simply grab your own umbrella. Next, you must master the incredibly difficult art of conscious detachment. The hyper-perceptive mind desperately wants to fix inconsistencies and solve impending crises, because leaving them unresolved feels psychologically itchy. If you notice a friend making a poor romantic choice, or a manager implementing a doomed strategy, your immediate instinct is to intervene. But here is a deeply liberating truth. You are allowed to let people be wrong. You do not have to correct the record to validate your own intelligence. Letting people make their own mistakes, even when you see the proverbial car crash coming in slow motion, is not a failure of your empathy or your perception. It is a vital survival tactic. You can see the world with crystal clarity and still choose, very deliberately, to look the other way when the battle is simply not yours to fight. Ultimately, seeing the world clearly only remains a burden if you let it run on autopilot. Once you take the wheel, this deep processing becomes an unparalleled strategic advantage. You will always be the person who reads the room best, who anticipates the market shift, and who understands human nature at its most raw and unfiltered level. You do not need to dull your senses or wish for blissful ignorance. You just need to stop carrying everyone else's reality on your shoulders. The world is heavy enough as it is. Use your brilliant clarity to navigate safely through the chaos, not to carry the weight of it. Put the heavy backpack down, take a deep breath, and finally enjoy the view your unique mind provides. If this resonated with your exhausted, over-analyzing brain, consider doing me a favor. Hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the weird, wonderful psychology of everyday life. Until next time, I am Dr. Arthur Sterling, reminding you to keep your eyes open, but your boundaries firmly closed.